Hello and welcome to the interviews here at the Sacra Project. If you appreciate these interviews, would you please consider to share, like and subscribe and comment with your thoughts below. And this enables me to know that you wish for more of these interviews to continue. Secondly, the Sacra Project is entirely run by donations. It is with your individual support that the project can continue, expand and grow this year and into next year. You can find how to donate via the donation page on the website, or please email directly and I can provide free international transfer options. Now, please sit back and enjoy this interview. Hello everyone and welcome to 2025's final interview here at the Sacra Project. And I would like to plug, just before we get started on this interview, that if you did enjoy these series of interviews throughout this year, to please consider donating so I can continue these interviews into 2026. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome my friend Sean Maxwell here today. He is an American organist and harpsichordist. He was based in Austria for more than a decade, and now he is working all around the world and extensively in Portugal, which we are both in at the moment as we record this. He specializes in early music performance with a strong interest in early keyboard works of the Iberian Peninsula and British Isles. And thank you so much, Sean, for being here today.
Thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, unfortunately, schedule and life did not permit us to be in the same room doing this in Portugal today, but we are both in the same country, so that's nice. Same time zone, it's a good start. So yeah, you've just come off a very busy period, so I really appreciate you being here today.
Absolutely, there's always time for this.
Yeah. So I'd love to, you have quite a strong social media presence, and I just love seeing your videos and sharing all of your experience essentially on the World Wide Web for us to see. But I would love to just start at the beginning for people who don't know is how did you come to play the organ?
It was quite an interesting development. I had some very good family friends with whom I went to church, and then my family also ended up joining us. And I had been playing some music, some keyboard instruments for a little while at this point. And I got along with the organist and music director at this church quite well, and spent quite a bit of time with her. And very unfortunately, she developed cancer, and she passed away within a couple months after the diagnosis. And the priest at the church knew that I was interested in music and keyboard instruments, and he asked me if I thought it possible that I could play some of the chants and some of the music necessary for the mass, to sort of add a little bit of sound back to it. And I said, okay. I was 13 or 14 at the time, and was happy to do it. And he said, yeah, we will advertise the position at the beginning of the following year, but it would be really great to have a little something if you think it's manageable the next couple months. And so I did, and it turned out quite well. I was very happy doing it. It got me out of school on a few occasions. The principal of the school was very understanding that the church needed music, and so I was able to leave lessons when there was a funeral or a wedding or a special mass. And so that was obviously great as a 14-year-old. And then the following year came, and they advertised the position, and nobody applied for it. And I continued to assist, and then they advertised in the following period, and nobody applied for the
That's
job.
great.
And at some point, I was beyond the legal age of employment in the United States, and they advertised it again, and I said, "Hey, what about if I formally applied for it?" And it worked out, and so I did that until my late teens when I moved to Austria,
That's fantastic.
and that's basically how it developed.
Yeah. So you were learning on the job, really. You were.
Uh, yes, I had a keyboard background from late childhood, essentially, but bringing that over to the organ was very much sort of on the job,
Yeah.
learning as you go experience.
Yeah.
But it turned out all right. And yeah, and I'm still connected with this church, and I go in and visit occasionally when I'm visiting family in my hometown, and that's quite nice.
That's really lovely. No, it's such a great story, and I'm hearing more and more of that, where a good organist will start quite young, and that's not a bad thing. It's a wonderful thing, because you need to be in the churches often to get to practice on that organ, and so you get to play for the liturgies, and yeah, you can, I think, sometimes mature faster than other instrumentalists. If you know, that's from my perception as an absolute non-organist, but that's that's what I can see, because people need organists, and then when a young aspiring organist or key musician is doing it, it's such a gift and like a treasure for that church. I think such a treasure. Yeah. So when did you come to play period instruments, and what was that journey? Because I believe from your US days, that was just like a modern organ, right? Like not, you weren't doing anything period then, no?
A little bit.
Okay.
So my interest in early music comes from the very beginning of my interest in music in general. My family, or extended family, will say, my father and all of my grandparents, they unfortunately passed away in a very short period of time, and so my mother then basically got all of the material from all of the households, and it ended up in boxes all over the place in our home, and that included quite a lot of records.
I didn't know
And
this.
there was a record player also in the house, in the dining room, and I don't know. At some point when I was 10 or 11, my eye kind of caught this record player and this stack of records to the side of that. Um, and I became interested in how it worked, and what it was, and what were these records. And I remember pulling a white record, well, a black record, but in a white container, pulling it out, and it was the Fifth Brandenburg Concerto. And I don't remember which recording it was. This must have been a record from the late 1970s or the early 1980s, but it was with a period instrument ensemble. And there was there was some text in the leaflet of the record talking about historical performance, and that sort of appealed to me. I was always interested in history and historic happenings as a kid, and so I remember figuring out how to put this record on the record player, and I always stuck with the one side, the third movement of the fifth Brandenburg. Oh yes, the third movement of the fifth Brandenburg Concerto, and I must have listened to it 100 times that week, and it stuck with me. And I remember an early teenager being really interested in contrapuntal music, that being the kind of music that drew my attention the most and kept me engaged the most. And there was an old piano in the house, and it was right next to the record player. And I remember thinking, oh, it would be great to be able to play along with these recordings. Being a 10-year-old, not realizing the pitch and temperament differences between this modern piano and the recording, but it was always in my head. And as I grew older, I was always interested in this sort of contrapuntal variety of music, which you obviously find predominantly in early music. And as I got even older, I came to realize that archival research was an inherent part of this kind of music, and spending time in archives and libraries and digging through documents was something I was really interested in, regardless of music. And so it sort of became a total package for me. And when I moved to Austria, there obviously were historic instruments all over the place in historic buildings, and I had access then to primary source documents in their archives, where the music was written and then the instruments, and yeah, basically it developed that way. Obviously, when I was playing liturgical music in places in America, they were predominantly modern instruments. There were some sort of historically inspired copies thrown in the mix as well. But I guess I accepted that as a occupational hazard, that I had to play a modern instrument occasionally. But since then, I've been very lucky to perform on predominantly historic instruments in I think now it's 23 countries, and so yeah, I generally get to avoid the modern ones when I want to.
That's fantastic. 23 countries now. That's quite an effort.
There's lots of airplane miles.
Yeah. For people who don't know, Sean is, I feel like, constantly jumping countries, especially the past few years. Yeah, so it's amazing. And I guess moving on to your point of travel, and of course you did that big change from the US to Austria, and now of course you're performing in many countries. Is there some big differences that you experience personally or as musicians, or really anything between the US and Europe? Is there some things that, I don't know, you have to mentally shift as when you jump between the continents, or just that intrigue for us people that are staying in kind of one place? What's it like going between countries?
The initial move was not something that was difficult. I was very fortunate. We had some neighbors, family, friends that were government translators, and did lots of translation for the government as well as publishing houses and things like that. And I spent an enormous amount of time with them growing up. And so I won't say that I grew up bilingual, but I had an extreme amount of German in my everyday life from the time I was before I was a
Yeah.
teenager, about 10 until I moved. And I had gone there multiple times before I moved, so it wasn't a big shift for me. I knew what to expect. As far as the work goes, as far as the general perception of sacred music, that was a bit of a shift. In the United States, I'm not sure what it's like in Australia with your background, but in the United States, the decent sized churches, I'll say medium small and larger churches generally have professional music departments, and you can live well from those, or a few of them combined into a viable job. I found it very interesting in many places in Europe that was simply not the case. That much of, even at the cathedral level, much of the music making is on a voluntary basis, which is a bit disheartening. But there are giving and taking in all of it. It's interesting to see that, particularly where I come from in the United States, is a predominantly Christian area, with heavy influence from the church, not only the Catholic Church, but multiple Protestant denominations. And where I live in Austria is also heavily influenced by the church, but you can easily go to places in Europe where that's just a second thought. And so that took some getting used to in my travels. Going somewhere to play in an organ festival where people were coming to listen to the organ as a concert instrument, and not because, obviously not because it's then sacred music, but they were not even interested in the church's role of this historic building. So a bit like whiplash, I suppose, going from West Virginia, where I was born in America, to Oberösterreich, a relatively strongly Catholic region in Austria, then going from there to places where that was simply not the case. That was a change, because you had to bridge this gap. In one place, you were looked at as a liturgical musician that happened to play some concerts, and in the other place, you were looked at as a concert organist that helped out in the church.
Can totally. Yeah, I can see this.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting, and that's, I guess, why I wanted to know from an American, because in Australia we have only big churches have, I would say, a music department. Small churches, it's slowly growing, and some people, it's like a community initiative. so a bit more like Europe, but there is a bit more money than Europe. And then in Europe, which, you know, we may have people who have been listening to different interviews over the year, it's like it's a community-based thing, and it's getting the people to join and to try and bring quality, but at an amateur level, particularly in France, etc. So it is quite a shift for different people, and I think there's good and bad in both. From a professional musician's point of view, yes, for us it's more difficult to earn our living and give that standard that we want in the liturgy and give it its due. It's like it costs money to have this standard. Like we had to train, etc.
Right.
But in another way, it allows the community to give prayer, like, well, give back to the church and give tithe in action with singing and building their voices, etc. So yeah, it's really interesting. And then to hear how you're saying some people go to the concerts just for the concert, you know, rather than the organ as an extension of this sacred space. That's another concept again. So it's really, I think it's good to know all the perspectives. So as we do travel and we move around, you know, and hopefully passing this information on to people watching, we have perspective for everyone and everything, and how do we approach each country and each place. So that's really great.
Right. It's an extremely broad spectrum in Europe and in the United Kingdom. I would say if we're looking at the United States as the easiest place to make a living as an organist or a liturgical musician, and we want to find something somewhat comparable in Europe or in Greater Europe, the easiest place is almost certainly the UK. They have this they still have this sort of high church tradition that values like boys choirs in cathedral settings and things like that. And I know very many organists particularly in England, and they don't quite really understand how good they've got it compared to some countries on the other side of the channel. And it's always quite interesting to give them some perspective.
Yeah.
Like those multiple cathedral organ jobs that come with full salaries and free accommodations and good luck finding that anywhere on the continent. So
yeah, precisely. Yeah.
But as you said, it's understanding where you're going, where you will be playing, what you're doing, and trying to make the most out of the situation that is there.
Yeah, that's great. The reason, I guess, bringing it to Portugal and playing here, because you are about to be performing soon in Portugal. But I really wanted to have you on today because of what you taught me, because I'm not an organist, and learning from you and from various organists I know in this country about, I guess, the hidden gem that is this country for organs, particularly in the north, from your perspective anyway. And could you please elaborate? Can we tell the world what Portugal holds?
Very happy to explain to the world. So I first came to Portugal in 2021, in April of 2021, to work with a choir. A now very good friend of mine had a semi-professional choir in the Porto area, and he had contacted me the year before, and had said, we're having an anniversary of the choir coming up, and we would like to invite an international organist for some of the performances. Could you imagine coming to Portugal to do that with us? And I had never been to Portugal, and it wasn't really on my radar at all, as it is not on anybody's radar in the organ world in Central Europe, and certainly not in the United States. And so I had no idea what awaited me. And in university and conservatory coursework in Europe and in the United States, Iberia is never mentioned. You just skip right over that. There was in my studies the words Iberian organ. It never they were never spoken.
Incredible.
And and so I went in April of 2021 to do a few performances with this choir, and got along with the director really well. We became very close friends, and I started to come back occasionally. I think twice more in 2021, and I began to see some more instruments and meet some colleagues, meet some festival organizers. We'll get to the unbelievable festival culture soon. And I started to realize, wow, I'm spending some time in just the greater Porto area, and I've seen something like 20, 25 instruments that are at least 150 years old, if not 300 or 350 years old. This is quite interesting. And I remember being taken to the first organ that I played in Portugal, which is my favorite instrument of all time. It's the one we'll talk about my album shortly. It's the one I've recorded on recently. An unbelievable organ. And so I started to realize, something's going on here. And they're talking about concerts, and why don't we go to an organ recital later? Or there are 3 of them later. Why don't we pick one and go to those? And you you can't say, let's pick one of 3 organ recitals in Austria anywhere. um, and so I started to spend some more time there, and I decided to dive deep into early Iberian keyboard music, because uh, it became a great market in the United States when I would do performances there, and I needed stories to tell to the audience, to explain the music, to explain the instrument, to show even pictures. I mean, some of these instruments that are unbelievable to look at as well as hear. And it really opened up into an untapped market in the US particularly, and people love to hear about it and learn about it, and it was music that they had never heard before, on an equal quality level of stuff from Central Europe that everybody knows, like Buxtehude, Bach, Böhm, Lübeck, those kind of people. Every bit that quality, but something that nobody else was doing, or not doing on a scale that was being noticed outside of Iberia.
Mm.
And so I decided I wanted to make one of my specialties this kind of historic keyboard literature out of Iberia. And yeah, I went to some unbelievable instruments, and I talking with builders and restorers and colleagues. I gained a lot of information about how the scene worked and how people looked at the organ in Portugal, which is also very important. Um, and so it's important to understand why they have these unbelievable instruments. Obviously, Portugal and Spain were unbelievably wealthy in the Renaissance and the Baroque through trade and expedition and all sorts of things, and they had the financial backing, of course, to create these over-the-top instruments. We'll say between 1550 and 1800. And what then normally happens in the rest of Europe is that there's this general financial stability, or a minimal, at least a minimum of financial stability and interest in development. I don't like the word development, but an interest in change and people there to fund it. So you have obviously have very historic instruments in Central Europe, but not really the proportions that you have in Portugal in particular, because in most of Central Europe, you have significant war damage all through Central Europe, one, but you say if you have an organ that was built in 1600 in Germany or Austria, it would have certainly been modified from its late Renaissance condition into a sort of early Baroque something, maybe in 1650 or 1660, and then a few generations later, that would not have been sufficient for them, and they would have altered it or torn it down and built a new one. And this would have happened every few generations, and then you get into the Romantic period, and you alter the disposition of the instrument. You make it less sharp and aggressive, and more fundamentals for Romantic music. And then the biggest issues come in the 20th century when you rip out mechanical actions and you put in pneumatic and electric consoles, and so these instruments, the case might be historic, but not much of what is inside has a lot to do with the historic instrument, because there was always this sort of minimum financial stability and interest in change. But that is not exactly the case in Portugal. As I mentioned before, you have an extremely wealthy country in the Renaissance and the Baroque, and excess money to make these over-the-top instruments, and some of the most beautiful the most beautiful instruments to look at certainly in Europe. And then without sounding negative or derogatory, obviously their financial position and position in the world has significantly changed in the last few centuries. It's financially a struggling country in the European Union. And so you have a plethora of these instruments that then become, at some point, unplayable. Say, whether that be 1800 or 1850, or at some point in the 19th century, they begin to deteriorate, as all instruments do. And the economic status of Portugal declines, and at some point, when these instruments are no longer playable, there is not money then to alter them, expand them, change them to classical or romantic instruments. There's certainly not money in the 20th century to put pneumatic or electric consoles into these instruments. And so, unlike most of Europe, what happens is they let them sit. And so around the country you would find late Renaissance and Baroque instruments that they became unplayable at some point, and then they allowed them to just sit because there was not funding there to change them over several generations. And what to their eyes they would have seen that certainly as that they were disadvantaged. They couldn't do something with this instrument. But to our eyes today, it's a major advantage because when Portugal did reach a certain level of financial stability, and there was money to take care of these instruments, renovate them, restore them, you have an unbelievable percentage of historic pipework inside the instruments. I mean, something like in Coimbra, in the Holy Cross
Santa Cruz.
monastery, the red organ on the wall, it has pipework from the 1550s, significant pipework from the 1550s, the middle of the 17th century, late 17th century, and very early 18th century, and I think it was restored in around 2003 or 2004, but essentially more or less left in this state from the beginning of the 18th century.
Yeah.
And it's a restorer's dream. And you have
it's a Baroque beast, like it is.
And you have that all over the country. I mean, in Porto there are close to 24 historic instruments. In Braga there are even more. Even not from Iberia, for example, the Schnitger organ that is near the airport in Porto. It's considered the best preserved Schnitger organ, or one of the best preserved Schnitger organs on the planet. And Schnitger was working in the Hamburg area, and I mean there are historic Schnitger organs or organs that Schnitger helped put together or altered, but nothing with the percentage of original material that the one in Maya has. So it's really an unbelievable situation in Portugal. And I'll say in the last 20 years, the amount of organs that have received funding to be restored is unbelievable. In Braga, they in a 10 or 12-year period they were able to restore something like 8, 9, 10 of them. So it's really incredible. And for somebody like me that's interested in performing on historic instruments and trying to create a soundscape that would hopefully not have sounded foreign to the original listeners, that's really wonderful to go to an instrument and it have 90% original material on it. Those are percentage numbers that you really don't find elsewhere.
Yeah. So. It's amazing. And I feel like for those who just don't know history, Spain and Portugal were the superpowers. And that's essentially, we have, that sense of the two countries that owned the world, and they were building their organs. And that's what we have now from the Baroque era and the Renaissance. So, and you explained this to me a while ago, but I feel like I've even learned a bit more. Like you've gone into depth, and I really can grasp now why, really why there are so many beautiful instruments, and they are playable in this country. And sometimes in the smaller towns, they might not have such a, elaborate instrument, but it's still, at least 150 years old and working, which in other countries we would be like, oh, no, let's upgrade, but they keep these instruments and they have such beautiful, unique sounds. And it's really, really special. So
Yes, it's also important to understand the way the Portuguese look at the organ. I mentioned that we would get to the festival situation in Portugal, which is unbelievable, unbelievable. If you have an organ festival in Austria, you're having 4 or 5 concerts, and you might get 25 people in one of the concerts, 30 people. Even at the highest levels, the organ concerts at St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna and at Salzburg Cathedral, they don't draw near the crowds that the average organ recital in Portugal does. And I mean, the ones in smaller areas, you can forget it. And when I first started to come to Portugal and I started to see advertisements for all of these festivals, I'm thinking, what's going on here? Because the big one that I'm playing in this coming week in Porto, the International Festival of Organ and Sacred Music, I'm playing on the 9th, the 14th, and the 15th. But those are 3 of dozens of concerts in this one festival. There is an international organ festival in Braga, and there are cycles of organ festivals all throughout the north. I can think of at least 9 different cities or towns off the top of my head where they have international festivals or significant cycles of organ recitals. And there's simply not a comparable culture for that in most of Europe. And it's very heartwarming to see. And I've talked with a few colleagues from Central Europe that have come to Portugal to play recitals, and I said, "See, you see what I was talking about?" And they're they are equally as excited about the approach to the instrument as I am, and I see press photos all the time from these festivals, and it's very heartwarming to see that people are standing in the back of the church or in side aisles because there are no seats.
Yeah.
That's what we like to see.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Just in general, as a performer, the attendance is very high for concerts here. It's very nice, and they how do I say it? Like, just so appreciative of the culture that you are providing. And I find that with the festivals and the municipalities, of course, it's hard work getting funding. There's the processes everyone has to go through, but the funding, providing free entry, we wouldn't have that ever in Australia, like free entry to high quality concerts, and
Right, exactly.
allowing and still paying the musicians, but not putting that burden on the people, so that the culture can flourish and allow these incredible instruments to be used and presented to the public more, etc. So Yeah, I definitely agree. And especially in the north, there's just so many things happening. Like you wouldn't know. For me, I don't live I live central, so I'd be like, which concert do you actually go north for? Because there's one every weekend or so you can
Yeah,
attend. So yeah, I concur absolutely. And I'm sure, yeah, as an organist, that must just be so heartwarming, as you say, and positive. Because yes, we have had our times where you might put a lot of advertising and work in and still very low attendance for various
yes,
events across different countries. So yeah, I think and their level of just love for you doing it, and you can just kind of tell by the applause and the people talking afterwards. It's a great
absolutely.
country like that.
Yes, I always feel like coming to Portugal and playing some recitals and talking with the people afterwards. It's a good way to recharge my battery, because well, you see, I don't have any hair, and I'm sure that the Americans and the Austrians are at fault for that. All of the all of the stress they put me through. So it's nice to go to a place where maybe my hair could grow back someday.
And with some good food and wine, pastel de nata, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes.
um, and you mentioned working on a very specific organ up in Porto, which I have beheld with my own eyes. It's a phenomenal instrument, and you have released a CD or a set of recordings, whatever we call it now, because we don't use CDs as much. Could you please highlight, yeah, this and which organ have you recorded on, etc.?
Yes, it is the organ of the Benedictine monastery, Saint Benedict of Victory in Porto. Um, it's an exceptionally beautiful instrument. It was actually designed by a monk in the convent.
Know that. Okay.
Um, yes, and it was completed sometime between 1717 and 1719. Planning probably began already in the first decade of the 18th century, if not a bit earlier. Um, and it took probably about 5 years to get all together. It is an unbelievably large instrument. It's one of the most significant historic Iberian sort organs in Portugal. At the time, in 1719, it would have been one of the largest instruments in Portugal. Um, it is gilded in gold, and it's a two manual instrument. The main manual, and the one below is the echo manual. It has so many unbelievable colors. You can bring out so many characters on the instrument, and the instrument itself has so much character that you even today I always discover new sound combinations when I play it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm fortunate to do quite a bit of work on it, and there is perhaps some exciting news with it coming up very soon as well, um, involving tourism with the monastery. And but I'm sure you'll all hear about that more later. Um, and yes, I recorded an album on this instrument. This is the first instrument I played in Portugal when I came in 2021. That's very, very dear to me, on top of it being such an incredible instrument. Um, and there was interest in me making a solo organ album with some groups in the U.S. And they asked me what I would like to do, and I said, "What? Given the option, if you just ask me and there are no stipulations with their funding or anything like that. If you just ask me what I want to do, I would really like to record the solo album on that instrument in Porto." I said, "There's a market for it here in the US because nobody is playing Iberian organ music in the US on a large scale. But also, Americans love anything with a good story, with some historic significance. And because of all of the trade happening in Portugal in the Baroque period, a lot of music from other areas in Europe and the United Kingdom reached Portugal and would have been played on an instrument like that. So the idea behind the album was to play, of course, Iberian literature from the period that would have been played on that instrument, but also take things that normally wouldn't be today considered kosher on an Iberian organ, um, and play it on that instrument, sort of out of the perspective of, this music reached Portugal through trade in 1720, and someone then would not have had any second thoughts about playing it on that instrument, and people would have heard that music on that instrument. Um, so let's listen to it from that perspective. So what I've done is I've I programmed some Portuguese music, some Spanish music, a piece of Catalan music, and then I looked at what else, through connections to Portugal, would sound nice on this instrument to showcase all of its colors and um, all of the ways that you can highlight the instrument. And so I picked Muffat and Froberger, the sort of Austrian court side of things. Um, we know there was an exchange of ideas and art through the Habsburg court in Austria, as well as the Spanish Habsburg court. And so I thought that is a nice connection for me in particular, as I'm based in Austria. I can bring some of that courtly music from where I've been working for so long into this Iberian instrument. Then I looked at the Hanseatic League, North Germany, the Netherlands, and I picked a fugue by Reinken. We know that he was working in Hamburg, and Hamburg sent aid to Portugal after the Lisbon earthquake. They were very, very well connected through trading routes, and so I thought, oh, that would also be a nice addition to the program, something from a Hanseatic city. And then I chose a piece of I guess you would call it English music, although by Handel, if we can consider him an English composer, which I think we certainly can. um, the port wine trade between Porto and Britain is historic, has always been enormous. The 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 support treaties between the two countries, the connection in general, all of the British people in the south of Portugal every
The
summer.
takeover in the south.
um, I thought, oh, it would be nice to do something English. I had initially looked at some John Stanley that did not make it on the album, but then I picked the second suite in F by Händel. That is on the album,
That's great.
and then something French, because there's a historic animosity between Portugal and France, sort of reaching a low point when Napoleonic troops show up in Porto,
It's a bit risky.
and there is a really wonderful story that can't really be proven 100% true or false, but it's a wonderful story. Well, a gruesome but wonderful story um, about French troops showing up in Porto, and they were unable to get into the cathedral as a sort of uh, secure location for their wounded troops. But they were able to get into the monastery of Saint Benedict of Victory, and as you know, the loft where the choir stall and the two instruments are is enormous. Uh, it, uh, Hundreds of people have room in that loft, and as the story goes, uh, they broke into the monastery and went up there, and they turned that enormous loft right beside my organ into a sort of field hospital.
Ah,
And uh, so I'm playing this piece of French music by Balbastre. It is uh, the canon from it's I suppose a piece of harpsichord music technically, but it works very well on this
yeah,
organ,
yeah.
particularly with the chamades, with the loud trumpet pipes sticking out, and uh, the famous part of this piece is how you take your fist and smash the bottom of the keyboard to make this cannon sound, and I thought that was certainly appropriate for wartime relations between Imperial Portugal and Napoleonic France. Um, so that's the idea around the album. It's called Pipes and
Yes,
Port.
perfect
Um,
name.
this sort, this sort of posh English idea of smoking your pipe and sipping port, but playing with that word pipe to mean the organ. Um, and the first two singles are out already on streaming platforms, and the entire album will be ready very soon and will be out
Yeah,
within about 2
yeah.
weeks.
I think by the time I release this interview, it'll be out. So yeah, head on over to your music streaming platforms. It should be there. So it's fantastic. Thank you. I
And
love the thought and care you've put into choosing the music to relate to the instrument, and obviously to showcase your talent, but also the instrument to make the most out of, I guess, the whole situation, and to provide such a beautiful kind of, I don't know, stories to each piece. It's very thoughtful. It's very nice.
thank
Yeah.
you. I will provide you and for those watching links to the streaming platforms, of course, but also the album was completely videoed, so you'll see video material of each piece on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
So you'll through Grace, you'll all get those
Yeah,
links.
thank you. That'd be great. You were recording during the night a lot, no, as well? There's some tough
Yes,
days
well,
for you.
Porto is Porto is a very loud city. Lots of things going on all the time. We tried to do it during the day. That would have made things a lot easier, but the sounds of tourists outside, people trying to get into the locked monastery, 350-year-old windows that are not exactly soundproof.
Yeah.
And people, there were a few instances where we were in the middle of a take during the day, and sweet old men connected to the monastery that happened to have keys. They would, for some reason, happen to have keys. They would come in and they would start praying out loud at a side altar, and very sweet, but unfortunately ruining the takes.
Bad timing.
So we made the decision that if we were going to have to work with all of the sound and interruptions, it would take weeks to get the recording done, and we only had 4 days.
Yeah.
And so we moved it to the nights, and we did sessions from after evening mass, so about between 6:30 and 7 in the evening until the wee hours of the morning, 5, 6, 7 in the morning.
Yeah, I'm telling me this is crazy. But I mean, I feel like the videos look really beautiful with the lighting and stuff. So I think it works very nicely.
Thank you.
Yeah, even though I'm sure you'd be tired, but it's a wonderful
Yes.
piece of work accomplishment for you.
I'm used to being jet lagged and running on about 20%. So.
It's quite true. It's quite true. Well, I'm very aware of the time, and I'm so glad that you have given so much of your time. I know you have a really busy schedule at the moment to do this chat with me and to talk about Portugal, the organs, your new album. And yeah, I just want to thank you so much, Sean, for being on here today with me. And I am really looking forward to seeing what like next year brings for you, and the things I'm sure we could plug as they come along.
Thank you very much for the invitation, for having me. It's always nice to chat with you, and we can do it in person soon.
Yes, we will. Thanks so much, Sean. Bye.